Thanks for joining us for Everly Heights, a Locals Guide. I'm Bill Meeks. We joined famed Everly Heights yo-yo YouTuber Louie Loop as he took us on a tour around the town. I thought that would be a very appropriate way to start out the episode. Well, the series, really. Now, here at the end of the episode, every episode, I'm going to dig in a little bit on the inspirations, both real world, my life, and external world inspirations for the story. And in this edition, I'm actually going to show you some of the real life locations that inspired various important locations in Everly Heights. Now, it'll be worth checking out the video version of this over on my YouTube channel at Bill Meeks LA, because I actually traveled to Wheeling, the real Everly Heights, last summer and spent about 2 hours wandering around and shooting some very familiar settings to me and hopefully to you as you get to learn the world of Everly Heights. First up, I want to talk a little bit about the coffee shop. That's coffee shop with a K. Now, my coffee shop is based on an actual coffee shop in the real Wheeling, West Virginia, Wheeling Coffee on Washington Avenue. I took a trip there last summer. Let's go check it out. And this is the coffee shop, the setting for a lot of Everly Heights stories, but most specifically, kids like us. A lot takes place here, like this table, for example. This table is where all the kids hang out, the kids like us. And over here, if we're all the hacky sack kids, play hacky sack. Now, I love the coffee shop, especially when I was like 17, 18 years old. It was basically, if there wasn't a local punk show going on, everybody I knew would gather at the coffee shop to drink coffee or Hank's cream soda, as I always like to drink. Smoke cigarettes, don't do that anymore, and generally play hacky sack, generally get into trouble. I'm sure you had hangouts like that in your hometown when you were a kid. Tell me about your coffee shop at billmeeks@everlyheights.tv. Now, Square's Pizza is based on DeCarlo's Pizza, now Patsy's Pizza. DeCarlo's Pizza is famous in the Valley. Basically, they cook the sauce and the crust together and then put the cheese and the toppings on afterwards. I don't know if it makes the pizza better or not, but it definitely is a very unique flavor, and it really brings out the flavor of the pepperoni. Now, I will say the former DeCarlo's Patsy's Pizza does have a program where you can actually get freeze-dried pizza shipped to your house via UPS. So if you want to try DeCarlo's or Patsy's or Square's Pizza like it is in Everly Heights, you can order it for, I think, about $50 a tray. Okay, now Franklin W. Dixon Memorial Library is based on the Ohio County Public Library in downtown Wheeling. This is a place that was very important to me, both because I was a huge reader of comic books and actual books. But there were times in my life where I didn't have a lot of people, and the best thing I could think to do with my time is go sit in the library and read a bunch of books. There was a little corner, like you'd go in, you'd go right. There was a little corner, like I think they called it the Jazz Cafe or something, with a couple computers, a couple comfy chairs back in the back. I'd go in, drop off my bag, go get a big stack of comic books or actual books, and then just go sit there for 4 or 5 or 6 hours and take in the culture. The train tunnel from our story is based on Tunnel Green in Wheeling. It's a really creepy train tunnel. It runs from South Wheeling all the way up to the old OVMC right below downtown. I think it runs about 2 or 3 miles, and it's basically a tunnel bored through a mountain. So it's very creepy. It can get when you get to the center of it, you can get very concerned because there's no quick way out. There's walls and mountains on either side, and a door all the way down there, and a door all the way behind you. And it gets a little creepy sometimes. McCulloch's Leap in Wheeling is a very famous historic landmark in Wheeling that I actually happened to live across the street from when I was 18 or 19 years old. I lived in a little blue house next to a bar that we called the Windmill because it was a big windmill. But yeah, it's an interesting sort of monument that they have there, and the sign for McCulloch's Leap and everything, because it's like, this was our hero. This was an incredible thing our hero did. He ran his horse down a hill, but he was also hunting Indians at the time, Native Americans, as we would say today.
And I think that's just an interesting dichotomy. And you see that all throughout, especially the South these days, where there are these great monuments built to their heroes. But when we look at them with modern sensibilities, they kind of fall apart. There is a weakness in nostalgia because we romanticize things. And then when we actually look at them with our modern eye, maybe there wasn't as much there to be nostalgic about as we thought. Now, the walking bridge is located about a quarter mile away from the coffee shop, which meant when the coffee shop closed, we would generally take the party down to the walking bridge. You know, we'd have whoever in our friend group had, you know, an ID or a brother who could go get them beer or something. We'd send them off on a run. Everyone goes down to the walking bridge, smokes cigarettes, hangs out, talks, all that kind of stuff. I had some of the most profound conversations I've had in my life on that walking bridge. I mean, maybe they felt that way a little bit because I was 18 and, you know, we romanticize a lot when we're 18, but especially with my friend Dave, who the character Benjamin Ainsley in the Everly Heights universe is based on. He was the first person that really made me feel like we were friends. Not just like, oh yeah, we're friends, we're friendly. Like, we talked about the real shit, you know? And it was all on the walking bridge, nursing a couple of cheap 40s. And finally, let's talk about Cornerstone Theater. This is based on my first theater that I ever acted in, Towngate Theater in downtown Wheeling, West Virginia. Well, really, center Wheeling, I guess, technically. And back behind me is Towngate Theater, the inspiration for Cornerstone Theater, where Michael Special works in Very Special and Curtain Call. I did a lot of theater at this place growing up. This is kind of where I got my start doing theater. I got involved because the girl I was seeing at the time was running lights for a show, and she was like, why don't you come down and audition? The show was the Children's Hour, and I got the part of Grocery Boy. Not a lot of parts for teenage guys in the Children's Hour, but I happened to get the part of the Grocery Boy, which was the guy who came in and basically told these two teachers who were being accused of being in a lesbian relationship that, yeah, confirmed, everybody in town hates you. Yeah, it was like a 3-line part, but it was my first part and I was super duper proud of it. But anyway, anytime I write Cornerstone, I picture Towngate in my head. Now, Michael Special, the guy who runs Cornerstone, who you'll meet later, he's more based on my theater professors, but we'll get into that when we get to Welcome Freshmen next week. Now, after I wrote this episode, I realized it was kind of a foreshadowing world-building episode because a lot of the characters and locations that we visit and the characters we talk to throughout this episode do come into play later in the story. In particular, Louie Loop's dad, Steve Loop, he is half of a two-hander later on in the season that I think might be my favorite episode of the season, honestly. It's about a school bully and a school nerd kind of reconciling after 20 or so years. Now, the whole episode is kind of based on a blog post I wrote Everly Heights, a local's guide, over at everlyheights.tv a couple months ago. The link will be in the show notes, but if you want to sort of see these locations that Louie Loop visits throughout the episode, head over to everlyheights.tv. Now, there are a lot of little teasers in this episode that tee up things that we're either going to be addressing later this season or in future seasons. In particular, the story Louie tells in the old Chi-Chi's parking lot about Dick Armstrong teases a project I'm very excited to tackle in season 2 of this podcast, The Last Chance Detective Agency. It's sort of my kid detective past his prime story. And again, we'll be telling it next season. Now, the narrator of this episode, Louie Loop, was voiced by my old friend Samuel Lewis, who played several characters on my previous auto drama, The Fakest, most notably Carl the Assistant. I want to give major props to Sam for playing both Louie and his dad, Steve Loop, in this episode. Now, we'll get to see Sam's portrayal of Steve Loop, or Steve the Geek, as a teenager next week in Welcome Freshmen. Now, in this section, I'm always going to be pointing out other Everly Heights connections to other Everly Heights stories. This episode is pretty much all connections, really. I've mentioned some of them, but some of them I'll keep under my hat for now. Suffice it to say, an episode that introduces you to Everly Heights has a lot of connections to Everly Heights. Now, I've been talking a while here, and I'd like to hear from you. What are some places from your hometown that stayed in your heart after you moved away? Shoot me an email at billmeeks@everlyheights.tv, and I'll share them in a future episode. Speaking of future episodes, that about does it for this one. I want to thank you so much for joining me on the inaugural Everly Heights journey, and we'll be back next week with another great story. Thanks for listening.